Police Academy exploded onto the screen in 1984 with outrageous humor, lovable misfits, and a brand of comedy that made it an instant classic. For fans around the world, it wasn't just a movie, it was the start of a wild, unforgettable ride through slapstick chaos and heartwarming camaraderie. But behind the laughter and larger-than-life characters, some of the beloved actors faced personal battles and tragic ends that fans never saw coming. In this heartfelt tribute, we honor the lives and legacies of the Police Academy stars we've lost, remembering the joy they brought to millions, and the real-life farewells that still leave a void. Bubba Smith was born Charles Aaron Smith on February 28, 1945, in Beaumont, Texas. From the very beginning, he stood out, not only for his imposing frame but for the weight of expectations placed on his broad shoulders. His father, a high school football coach, raised him in a strict household where love was discipline and approval was conditional. The Smiths lived modestly, and Bubba often walked barefoot to school, his future as uncertain as the cracked pavement beneath him. Before Hollywood knew him as the towering Moses Hightower in Police Academy, 1984, the world knew him as a fearsome NFL star. But even on the football field, where he achieved greatness with the Baltimore Colts, Bubba never truly felt at home. Fame came fast, but fulfillment never followed. His transition into acting was unexpected and clumsy. He wasn't trained, only invited. And yet, with few lines and a tender soul beneath all the muscle, he made Hightower unforgettable. His character's gentleness and quiet dignity mirrored his real self, misunderstood, soft-spoken, lonely. Behind the camera, Bubba battled typecasting and the suffocating silence that followed each closing credit. He was never offered serious roles. He was only the big guy, the muscle, never the man with a voice. He resented it but bore it quietly, just like he had borne so much in life. His father's harsh judgment, the post-NFL emptiness, the casual racism of Hollywood, and the crowd's fading cheers. Though he never married or had children, he longed for a deeper connection that never came. Friends said he kept to himself, rarely letting anyone into his inner world. In truth, the public persona of strength had become his emotional prison. He once admitted that he hated football for what it had taken from him: his body, his youth, and most painfully, his identity. On August 3, 2011, Bubba Smith was found dead in his Los Angeles home from acute drug intoxication and heart disease. He was 66. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at $500,000, a modest sum for a man who once filled stadiums and made millions laugh. But no wealth could fill the quiet void he left behind, the echo of a gentle giant who was seen by millions, yet deeply known by almost no one. George Gaines was born George Jongens on May 16, 1917, in Helsinki, Finland, though his life would never be rooted in one place. He was the child of a Dutch businessman and a Russian opera singer, and from the start, his world was divided between discipline and drama. As Europe collapsed into war, so did his childhood. His family was displaced, his identity fragmented. He would never quite belong anywhere, and perhaps that was the quiet tragedy of his life, always playing a role, even off stage. Before audiences came to adore his bumbling charm as Commandant Eric Lassard in Police Academy, 1984, George had endured the horrors of World War II, serving in the Royal Netherlands Navy. That war, with its grim clarity, shaped the somber edges of his smile and the patience behind his eyes. He didn't find fame until much later in life, after decades of being the other guy in Hollywood. It was Lassard who brought him visibility, but not peace. Lassard, with his gentle confusion and good-hearted leadership, was an exaggeration of George's own persona, a man who tried to do good in a world that rarely made sense. But in truth, George struggled with the artifice of acting. He often spoke of feeling like a ghost in his own life, drifting from role to role, never grounded, never real. His marriage to actress Allen and McLary lasted over 60 years, but theirs was not a life without storms. Raising children while balancing two careers brought long separations and hidden resentments. His adopted son, Matthew, died tragically young, and George never truly recovered. He carried that pain like an invisible wound, one he never spoke of but always wore. In his final years, George withdrew almost entirely from public life. He settled into quiet isolation in North Bend, Washington, where the applause no longer reached him. On February 15, 2016, he passed away peacefully at the age of 98. His net worth, estimated at $5 million, reflected a long and varied career, but not the cost of a life lived mostly in performance. The man behind the commandant had longed for something more enduring than laughter, a sense of place, of permanence. But he left the world as he had entered it, a traveler between nations, roles, and lives, always passing through. David Graff was born Frederick David Graff on April 16, 1950, in Zanesville, Ohio, a quiet, unassuming town where boys grew up dreaming of escape. David's father died when he was just a boy, leaving a hole in the family and a silence in David's heart that would echo for the rest of his life. Raised by a single mother in modest circumstances, David retreated into television shows and daydreams, finding in them the structure and clarity his life lacked. From an early age, he learned to mask his grief with humor, the kind that made people laugh but kept them at a distance. He became a household name in 1984 with Police Academy, playing Sergeant Eugene Tackleberry, a gun-loving, rule-bound officer with a strangely tender heart. The role was both a blessing and a quiet curse. Tackleberry made him famous, but it trapped him too. David was nothing like his character. In truth, he hated violence, cherished peace, and wrestled with the contradiction of being loved for embodying what he didn't believe in. His talent was deeper than the roles he was offered, but Hollywood didn't see it or didn't care to. Graff longed to be a serious actor, to lose himself in roles that explored the depth of human experience. Instead, he became a caricature, forever the wide-eyed, gun-happy Tackleberry. Over time, that frustrated him more than he ever admitted publicly. Behind the scenes, the laughter came with a cost, a quiet depression, an aching sense of being overlooked. In real life, David was deeply devoted to his wife, Kathy, and their 2 sons. Yet even in his happiest moments, friends noticed a restlessness in him, a longing for recognition, not just applause. He was a good father, a loving husband, but he sometimes wondered if his life had become a footnote to a joke. On April 7, 2001, just 9 days before his 51st birthday, David Graff collapsed and died from a sudden heart attack while attending a family wedding in Phoenix, Arizona. It was a shock to everyone. His death was like his career, quiet, too soon, and deserving of more notice. At the time of his passing, his net worth was estimated at $2 million, enough to live, but not enough to silence the feeling that he had been capable of so much more. To the world, he was Tackleberry. But to those who knew him, David Graff was a gentle soul, hidden behind a badge, aching to be understood. Marion Ramsey was born on May 10, 1947, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, into a world that barely listened to voices like hers. Raised in a working-class black family during a time when opportunity was rationed and dreams were deferred, Marion learned early that silence wasn't always a choice, it was a survival tactic. She found escape in church choirs and community stages, her voice soft but filled with yearning. That voice, high and delicate, would one day make her famous, even as it masked her deepest sorrow. In 1984, she stepped into the role of Officer Laverne Hooks in Police Academy, and something strange happened. Audiences couldn't get enough of her timid, whispery presence. Hooks became iconic, her quiet protests and sudden outbursts earning laughter in a world loud with noise. But the irony was painful. Marion had trained for Broadway, had a voice that could shake rafters and command silence. Yet she became known for playing the woman no one could hear. Fame didn't change her life the way she hoped. Typecasting closed more doors than it opened. She struggled to find work beyond the franchise. Hollywood wanted the caricature, not the woman behind it. The roles dried up. The phone stopped ringing. She performed in small clubs, voiced cartoons, and quietly advocated for HIV/AIDS awareness, work that meant more to her than the spotlight ever did, though the spotlight was what she craved and feared in equal measure. Her personal life was a fortress. She never married, never had children, and rarely spoke of loneliness, but it was always there, under the surface. Friends said she poured everything into her work, that her heart broke quietly every time she was forgotten by an industry that once cheered for her. On January 7, 2021, Marion Ramsey passed away from sepsis at the age of 73. At the time of her death, her net worth was estimated at only $1 million. Modest for someone whose face had once graced movie posters worldwide. She died without much fanfare, without the tributes she deserved. To the world, she was Hooks, the soft voice in a loud room. But to those who truly listened, Marion Ramsey was a woman of depth and dignity, fighting to be heard in a world that mistook silence for simplicity. Hers was a life of whispered pain and quiet, enduring courage. Art Metrano was born Harpo Metrano on September 22, 1936, in Brooklyn, New York, where tough streets and tighter wallets shaped his childhood. His father, a house painter, worked long hours to provide for the family, while Art grew up dreaming not of fame, but of simply mattering. The laughter he would later provoke came from a deep place. Humor was how he protected himself from the sting of poverty and the shame of never quite feeling good enough. In Police Academy 2, 1985, and 3, 1986, he became instantly recognizable as the pompous, smarmy Lieutenant Mauser, a villain made laughable through arrogance and cowardice. Audiences loved to hate him, but few knew the man behind the smirk. Art had spent years clawing his way up through nightclubs, forgettable sitcom appearances, and rejection after rejection. His stand-up act, a deliberately terrible magic show, got him on The Tonight Show, but it never brought the kind of fame he hoped for. Mauser came late in his career. By then, he already knew what it meant to be overlooked. But the real tragedy struck in 1989. While working on his home, Art fell from a ladder and broke his neck, becoming a quadriplegic. In a single, shattering moment, the stage went dark. He was paralyzed from the shoulders down, told he would never walk again. For a man who had used his body and timing to make others laugh, it was a cruel twist of fate. He spiraled into depression, battled hopelessness, and at one point even considered ending his life. Yet somehow, Art didn't give in. Through grueling therapy, he regained limited mobility and eventually returned to the stage, not with jokes, but with raw honesty. His one-man show, Metrano's Accidental Comedy, told his story with brutal truth and unexpected grace. The laughter he won now came from courage, not parody. He remained married to his wife Jamie, with whom he had 4 children, though their life was far from easy. The accident strained everything: finances, family, identity, but Jamie stood by him. Still, the man who once made millions laugh lived in relative obscurity, mostly forgotten by the industry that once embraced him. On September 8, 2021, Art Metrano passed away of natural causes at his home in Florida, just shy of his 85th birthday. His net worth was estimated at $1.5 million, a lifetime of work reduced to a number. But no figure could reflect the weight he carried or the spirit that refused to be broken. Art Metrano lived between punchlines and pain, and in the end, he taught us that even laughter can be an act of survival. Doug Lennox was born on January 21, 1938, in Toronto, Canada, a city as cold and quiet as the man he would later become. Raised in post-depression hardship, Doug's early life was painted in shades of gray. His family struggled to make ends meet, and Doug, the youngest of 3, often found himself lost in the noise of other people's problems. He learned early to be still, to observe, to wait for moments that might never come. Acting, for him, wasn't ambition, it was escape. He entered show business not through glamour but through necessity. Radio came first, then writing, and eventually small roles on television. He was never the star, rarely the name on the marquee. His most memorable performance came in X-Men, The Last Stand, and among cult fans as the menacing, leather-clad villain in Police Academy, 1984, and its sequels, a role so forgettable to critics yet strangely burned into the memory of a generation. His characters were tough, stoic, cruel. But the man behind them was far more fragile. Doug lived a fractured life between roles. He struggled for decades to find consistent work, always on the edge of visibility. For every small part he landed, there were 10 rejections, and the phone never rang for long. He once said that the worst part of being an actor was never knowing if the last gig was truly the last. That fear haunted him like a shadow. Though he carried himself with quiet dignity, Doug was deeply lonely. He never married, never had children, and kept his personal life wrapped in silence. Friends described him as introspective, even brooding, and often unreachable. Success came too late and never felt real. He spent much of his later life giving voice to audiobooks and writing screenplays that were never produced. Doug Lennox died on November 28, 2015, at the age of 77, alone in Toronto. The cause of death was undisclosed, and his passing barely made headlines. At the time, his net worth was estimated at a modest $800,000. For a man who had brushed against fame, who had played villains with such presence, the end came quietly, without applause. He was never a household name, but to those who paid attention, Doug Lennox embodied a quieter tragedy, the kind where a life full of effort meets a world that barely notices. His story is one of shadows, a performer who spent his life pretending to be seen. Andrew Rubin was born on June 22, 1946, in New York City, a place bursting with ambition, but where some dreams are swallowed whole before they ever have a chance to bloom. The son of a dentist and a housewife, Andrew grew up in the shadow of post-war expectations, where success was defined by stability, not passion. But Andrew had something else inside him, something restless and unshaped. Acting became his answer to the question he could never articulate. What do I do with this ache inside me? He trained at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, a promising student with a smile that could melt through cynicism. For a while, it looked like things might work out. He landed guest roles on popular shows like Mary Hartman, and The Rockford Files, always the charming man on the edge of something bigger. In 1984, he appeared as the flirtatious cadet George Martin in the original Police Academy. It was supposed to be his breakout. The role was small, comic relief, the handsome, smooth-talking womanizer who faded into the background as the franchise grew. Andrew never returned for the sequels. Hollywood, as it often does, moved on without explanation. The years that followed were scattered with minor parts, auditions that led nowhere, and long, painful stretches of silence. Andrew watched contemporaries rise while he stood still, his talent eclipsed not by lack of ability, but by luck, timing, or something crueler. Behind the charm was a man aching to be taken seriously. He hated being boxed into the good-looking guy role. He longed for dramatic material, something with teeth, something real. But the industry didn't see depth, they saw a face. And as his youth faded, so did the offers. He married actress Lauren Cohn, but the marriage ended, quietly, without scandal or explanation. He never remarried. Friends say he became increasingly reclusive in his later years, retreating from the industry that once teased him with the promise of greatness. He turned to writing and voice work, a way to stay creative without standing under the harsh lights of disappointment. Andrew Rubin died on October 5, 2015, from lung cancer at the age of 69. His passing received little public attention. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at just $600,000. A modest number for a man who once stood on the brink of stardom. He left no children, no long list of blockbuster credits, just fragments of appearances and the lingering memory of a smile that suggested he was meant for more. Andrew Rubin was one of those faces you remember but can't quite place. And maybe that, in itself, is the saddest kind of fame. Joyce Gordon was born on March 25, 1922, in Des Moines, Iowa, a quiet city, far from the spotlight she would one day seek. Growing up during the Great Depression, she was no stranger to hunger, to sacrifice, to watching her parents stretch nickels into meals. But Joyce had something that couldn't be rationed, a voice. Smooth, confident, and poised. In a world that often ignored women, her voice demanded to be heard. She moved to New York, chasing radio work before the golden age of television had even begun. For years, she thrived in anonymity, doing commercials, voiceovers, and behind-the-scenes narration. She wasn't seen, but she was everywhere. A woman in a man's industry, Joyce fought hard for every opportunity. She had to sound not just polished, but perfect. There was no room for error, and certainly no space for vulnerability. Her brief on-screen role as Mrs. Thompson in Police Academy, 1984, was just a flicker in a career mostly lived off-camera. The part was small, nearly forgettable to audiences, but for Joyce, it was symbolic, one of the rare times she stepped into the light, even if just for a moment. For decades, she had been the voice selling soap, narrating documentaries, speaking through faceless ads. But recognition never came. Joyce's personal life was similarly quiet. She married fellow voice actor Bernard Grant, but their relationship bore no children. While their union lasted, it was one of two people whose careers required constant performance, even in private. Friends described her as elegant but emotionally guarded. She often deflected conversations about regret, but the regret was there, visible in her long silences between stories. As opportunities dwindled in her later years, Joyce faded into near total obscurity. The industry she had helped shape with her voice forgot her name. Younger talent, newer voices, and changing technology left her behind. She didn't fight it. She simply disappeared. Joyce Gordon died on February 28, 2020, at the age of 97. There was no fanfare. No headlines. Her net worth at the time of death was estimated at $300,000. A lifetime of work, reduced to a whisper. She was the woman you heard but never saw, the warmth behind the advertisement, the grace between the lines. In the end, Joyce Gordon was a ghost of the golden age, one who gave her voice to the world, but never got to speak her own story. Steve Guttenberg was born on August 24, 1958, in Brooklyn, New York, into a working-class Jewish family where ambition clashed with insecurity. His father, an electrical engineer, believed in structure. His mother, a surgical assistant, believed in dreams. Steve lived between them, a boy who made people laugh so they wouldn't look too closely. Comedy for him was never just performance, it was camouflage. In 1984, Police Academy changed his life overnight. As Carrie Mahoney, the cocky, charming slacker with a good heart, Guttenberg became a star. He wasn't the toughest, the smartest, or the strongest in the cast, but he was the one everyone loved. For a while, he was everywhere. Cocoon, Three Men and a Baby, Short Circuit. His grin became iconic. But behind that easy smile was a man terrified of fading too soon, of being seen as a joke, not an actor. And then, it happened. By the early 90s, Hollywood moved on. Offers slowed, then stopped. He tried stage work, television pilots, even writing a memoir. But the momentum was gone. He once joked, one day you're in People magazine's Sexiest Men, the next, you're wondering if your name is misspelled on your hotel bill. The truth was far sadder. Steve Guttenberg had become a relic of an era no one missed until it was gone. His public image remained cheerful, but friends spoke of deep bouts of self-doubt, of long nights where he questioned everything, his talent, his timing, his worth. He never married, though he came close more than once. He admitted that fame made intimacy difficult. Everyone loved Mahoney, but few really knew Steve. He never spiraled into scandal. There were no arrests, no meltdowns. Just a quiet slide into near obscurity, a fate sometimes crueler than collapse. He continued to act in smaller projects, occasional TV appearances, even Hallmark movies, always hopeful the phone might ring again with something that mattered. As of 2025, Steve Guttenberg is still alive at 66, his estimated net worth around $15 million, earned honestly over decades, yet never quite enough to fill the silence that followed the applause. His story isn't one of catastrophe, but of erosion. Not a crash, but a quiet fade. He once said, "People think the worst thing is being forgotten. It's not. It's being remembered for something you can never live up to again." And in that sentence, the tragic heart of Mahoney and Guttenberg beats. Which character from Police Academy, 1984, holds a special place in your heart? How does it make you feel knowing that some of the beloved cast members are no longer with us? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to share them in the comments below. If you've been enjoying this content, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching.